Good afternoon. Welcome. Call the meeting of the Capital Improvement Street Maintenance Committee of the City of Wausau to order this Thursday, January 9th, 2020 at 5:30 p.m. A quorum of the committee is present. Public comment for matters not appearing on the agenda. Does anyone have public comment? We, of course, will hear public comment during specific items on the agenda. But if there's general public comment that you want to speak to matters that are not specifically on the agenda, we welcome public comment at this time. Yes? Would you come up? If you have public comment, please come up. Your name and address, please, for the record.
My name is Tiana Phillips. I live on 704 Scott Street. I just wanted to bring up the issue of proposing to have a non-parking on the streets in my area next winter. So I guess my issue is a lot of the houses where I live are like duplexes or multifamily homes, and there really isn't anywhere to park. So like, if you were to impose that law, we would have to get parking down at the parking garages and then walk like 2 or 3 blocks. And it just seems a little bit much, you know? I mean, from my perspective, I have a 6-year-old child. So if I have to park that far and then walk with groceries or anything I have, I'm sorry, I had to run here to get here because I like work until 5. So it just seems to be like a bit much to me. I mean, what other alternatives would there be, you know, other than walking from a parking garage downtown back home?
Just so that you know, the City of Wausau will be studying this issue of overnight parking during the, so I think we welcome your comments today. I think that if you continue to watch this committee, we will be studying that issue and talking about that issue pretty much through a good part of this year. So we certainly welcome you to come back and speak to the issues as they are being defined, and some of the issues that are being talked about today.
So if that was to be put in effect, what option would there be? What option would there be for the people that live in my area?
Right now, we really don't know at this point in time some of the various options and some of the other threads that may be going through, some of the pros and cons, some of the variety of things that are being talked about with regard to winter overnight parking. So we're just beginning the study. We're just beginning to talk about it. So, at this point in time, I don't think we have answers to you, but we certainly, hopefully, by sometime in the middle of the year, we hope to have some answers for you.
Okay, wonderful.
But thank you for coming.
Yeah, thank you.
And we have your name and address, so we will be back in touch with you with regard to as we progress.
Okay, or I'll just like keep up on it. And
Okay,
keep
thank
coming in.
you very much for
Thank you.
coming. Thank you. Is there anyone else for public comment this evening? Just so that you, like I said, for specific items on the agenda, we welcome your public comment during that time. There was a request to move number 15, establishment of a pilot valet program downtown, up on the agenda. So after the consent agenda, we will be considering number 15, the issue of valet parking downtown. So number 2 on the agenda is consent agenda, which is the approval of minutes of the December 12th, 2019 meeting. Also action on stormwater maintenance agreement for North Central Healthcare expansion on 1100 Lakeview Drive, and action on stormwater easement with T-Bird Enterprises LLP at 1735 Merrill Avenue. A motion to accept the consent agenda would be in order. There is a motion for that. Is there a second? There is a second for Mary. Any further comments or questions with regard to the motion to approve the consent agenda? Hearing none, all in favor said, all in favor of the motion for the consent agenda, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion is agreed to, and thus the consent agenda is approved. Moving then on number 15, establishment of a pilot valet program in downtown Wausau. I think Eric maybe want to start us off on that.
Sure, I'll introduce this one.
So we had a downtown business on the 300 block of 3rd Street come and ask about the potential of doing valet parking for their restaurant. We have 2 representatives here as well for that. I have a staff write-up memo here that Mary Ann and myself have put together. And really, this is, right now, we've established it, but it's a pilot program for the next couple of months. So the businesses can determine, how it's going. The city can determine how well it's utilized, and then any other interests. But if they want to explain, both Adam and Mark, thanks for coming.
And your name and address, please?
My name is Adam Jamgoshen, 1931 Fairmount Street, 54403.
I'm Mark Craig with Compass Properties. I live at 814 Adams Street. And about a year ago, John Noel and Bob Wyrock, and at that time Jim Daly, asked me to look into valet parking. So I went to La Crosse and studied valet parking at the Charmont Hotel and realized that it could be done in smaller communities and done successfully, but we weren't able to implement it. And when Adam was talking to Jim Daly about the purchase of the business, he had talked about adding valet, Lemongrass, Asian Fusion, which is going to be opening on the 300 block of 3rd Street, also has been requesting that that be part of the business plan. And so Adam was able to find somebody, and I'll let him take it from there, but it looks like it could work well.
Yeah, so originally, my original thought was to have my 18-year-old son and his friends do this, and then it sounded to be more organization than I had time for. The hotel was talking about doing something like that, and he contacted, Jerome is the name of the representative from Zenith Hospitality Group that I've been working with out of Madison. Mary Ellen forwarded him to me, and I said I'd be very interested in the service. So he pretty much provides everything from the podium to the tickets to uniforms, everything regarding, and also a $2 million per person liability insurance umbrella, which I was going to take on myself, but even better, I didn't have to worry about that on my end. So that being said, I formerly owned Michael's Supper Club in Rib Mountain. I have quite a few older or elderly clients that would love to come to my restaurant, but their biggest drawback is not being able to park close enough to the restaurant and walk there without worrying about slipping or falling or any of that. And also, I just wanted to kind of bring it to the table as another service aspect that I'm trying to offer. He currently works for me, but they're willing to park anybody's car that pulls in there. It's just if they're not coming to see me, the charge is a little bit higher because obviously I'm paying for it and trying to get some, I'm not trying to break even or make money on it. I'm just trying to provide a service.
And it works with 2 stalls at your front
Correct.
location, Thursday, Friday, Saturday night, 5 PM to,
Question mark.
yep. And they can drop the car off. You can text when you're done with dinner. They'll bring the car back, give them a little heads up, 15 minutes, and they bring the car back. And Mary Ann and Eric and the mayor and I had talked about parking them in the J.C. Penney's deck at this time.
Yep.
And so that, we're hoping to continue as a pilot program, bring it back for further discussion with council, I think in March, see how it goes over the next few months. I talked to Robin, the general manager of the hotel today. He's very interested in seeing it at the hotel. It could possibly be a station at the front desk and as well as on 3rd Street, that it helps everybody that wants to come downtown and have any concern about parking in evenings or during events. As we know, we all love the Grand Theater, but it's 1,200 seats. A night like tonight, everyone will come downtown, they'll park on the street, they'll go to the show at 7:30, and then all the prime parking is taken. So if you want to stop at Chow or City Grill or Jalapenos or Malarkey's or grab a drink or a bite to eat, you're going to walk. So this could help everybody long-term.
Absolutely, and if more restaurants or other people are willing to participate in the program, I'm sure that Zenith Hospitality Group would much rather have 8 to 10 people waiting to park cars rather than my one guy. I have the 2 spots that they get there at 4 o'clock and they kind of rope it off with stances, like theater stances, and put a sandwich board between the 2 spots so guests could pull in and exit their vehicle safely and just get out and go right into the restaurant or wherever they're going to go. And we did it for our first time last weekend. It was fantastic. The people that used it really loved the feature.
Like a dozen cars on Saturday
Yeah,
night.
yeah.
So, anyway, so we appreciate your support.
Lisa, yes.
Thank you. I know this is on as an update because it's a temporary program, so we don't have to approve it tonight. Eric's got that handled already, but I have to say I love this idea because this is something, it's a new offering that we can allow in the River District. It occurs during the dinner hours, so obviously we don't enforce parking fines after 6 PM anyway. So the fact that 2 of those parking stalls could be utilized, I would see the process of allowing it being no different than what we did for the taxi stand that's behind the 400 block stage. And so hopefully this works, and if enough businesses downtown like it, I hope that it will expand and, maybe be an offering throughout the downtown because there's more restaurants that may be interested in it. So I think it's great, and I hope it works, and I hope that we see you guys back in a few months, and maybe we can make it permanent, so.
Yeah, well, thank you for hearing my case, and that being said, when I promoted it on Facebook, I got a lot of people saying what a great thing, because we don't go down there for dinner because we don't want to walk that far, or we can't walk that far, and that's pretty much my story.
It's a forward-thinking idea, and I think that's really what we're looking for down there is, stuff that's new and unique, and I think it'll be a great added feature for down there.
But you're doing this today. I mean, I saw you blocked off a couple parking spots today without really, I mean, isn't this sort of,
They're on temporary approval today.
well,
we came-
but whose temporary approval? I mean,
So in October, we came to meet with Mary Ann and the mayor. We had a discussion. Madam, I thought it was approved then, and then we realized last week that it wasn't after he posted social media. So we came back to a meeting last week, Friday, with the mayor, Eric, Mary Ann, and there was some discussion about whether or not the Public Works Director has the authority to implement a pilot program, which has been done in other communities across the nation, and there's examples of it. And so the discussion at that meeting was that we could implement a pilot program, and then if we want to do a permanent program, we'd have to come back to the committee and council for full approval, which is why we're here tonight, to just inform you of what's going on.
so does the Director of Public Works have that power to,
No, unfortunately, he doesn't, but the committee does.
Right, I
Under the
understand that.
ordinance,
I would understand
the
that.
committee can tonight make a motion to approve temporary regulations under a temporary pilot program for them to do this. Then when they come back the next time, we would actually have to recommend passage of an ordinance to make that permanent and put it in our ordinance book so that if you wanted to write citations or, get people to move along out of those spots, there would be the authority. So it has to be the CISM committee, that's.
no, I
that's
understand
what-
that. But they raised the issue that, and I just wanted that clear from you with regard to the powers of the Director of Public Works.
What was the length of the proposed pilot?
Well, it's temporary. I mean, it's similar to temporary parking. I mean,
So was it a 30-day originally, 30 or
3 months
60?
is what we were hoping. to
3
get
months,
through the winter.
January, February, and then into March.
Okay, so then I'll move that we temporarily approve this arrangement for 90 days, and that at the end of the 90 days, we would, or in at least a couple weeks in advance of that, we would then bring this item back to consider permanent implementation if it's working.
Is there a second for that? There is a second. Questions? I'm sure we have questions. Mary, yes.
I really like the idea. Lucky for me, a council member was actually there last weekend at your restaurant having a private party in the back of your restaurant. And I didn't realize that there was valet service when we were walking in. I was telling my husband, had I known, me wearing my 3-inch heels, to a nice restaurant, I would have loved to valet. It was super cool. I look forward to it next time. I guess my questions for Mark or Adam, or maybe for us here, is I understand that you have 2 designated parking stalls for your restaurant. I'm going to assume that, is that correct? Right?
So
2?
we're trying to do
It's-
now.
That's what we're trying to do, but last week and now this week at 4 o'clock, the guy just kind of waits for a spot, 2 spots to open up next to each other, maybe not directly in front of my place, but very close in the vicinity, so they're, as long as they're next to each other, that's, I figure, the safest way to offer it.
Okay, just some things to consider, because there's other merchants and businesses in that corridor as well, too. I hope that they're bought into it as much as how I feel really excited about having that type of kind of concierge service by the 300 or the 400 block. I would love to see the pilot last a little bit longer than 3 months, because I think about the summertime, and I think about the big events that we host on the 400 block. I also know that when it's warmer, people are out, right? They're more inclined to come downtown, and I love for us to see how the pilot is exposed to when we have traffic, when we have foot traffic down there, and probably more commuting traffic down there. As we're pulling in and pulling out, is there any kind of gridlock, or, just to understand how it operates, the pilot operates throughout the summer, because we do have a lot of things happening downtown. Certainly, I'm an advocate for the pilot. I think it's really neat, and I think that other people will enjoy and appreciate the services as well, too.
Do you want to amend it and make it 6 months?
Yes.
I'm up for that. I'll amend my motion.
Okay, so do I need to say that, or would you just?
I think Lisa's amendment is taken very well. And the second, I think, is agreeable to that.
Okay, because when do we normally have our concerts on the 400 block?
Third week of June, they kick off.
3rd week of June?
Yep. through
So if we go
August.
6 months from today's
That's what get
date,
us into July.
does that get us to July? Okay. I think that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you.
Linda?
If I ever wear my 3-inch heels again in my life, I'll be there. It's a great idea. But is the part that we're ultimately regulating just those couple of parking spaces, or allowing Zenith to operate? Does Zenith ultimately need a license for some reason? Because,
They
You
are
know.
a licensed hospitality operator in
so
Eastern
what,
Madison.
in 6 months, what will we be coming back to grant permanently? Is it the parking and the posting of the parking? As opposed to the function? The function seems
I
legal
think
now.
just the creation of the ordinance appropriate to this type of valet service, this exemption really to the parking ordinance is, I think that's what I'm understanding. It would just an ordinance with regard to allowing that as a variant, not a variance, but an exception to the parking ordinance.
And maybe at that time, we designate a couple stalls. and
Well,
we know
yeah,
what
that's-
they are, and they're signed, and they
Right.
say that these evenings, because that's what the chief of police called the other night. about it.
Right.
He goes, right now, I don't have the backing of the council. If somebody else decides to park there, I can't really do anything about it, and we understand that. But we also feel people will use common sense and courtesy and see that there's an activity going on and not try to interfere. So we're not too worried about that, but at that point, we might want to, and maybe it's in the vestibule of the Palladium on Third Street. So it's neutral to sites, it's, people are there, it's 24/7, that vestibule's open and heated, and the spots are over in front of HT Cobbler, and there's 3 spots. I don't know, let's see how this unfolds with Chow and Adam, and,
Yeah, well, I pay for it.
well, initially, maybe we find other ways to solve all that too.
Jam Goshi and Park.
Yeah.
Just some thoughts, we'll see where it goes.
I'm not trying to make any trouble. I'm just trying to offer something new, exciting, and making it easier for people to enjoy the area.
Pedro from Jalapenos, I talked to yesterday, he was excited about the idea. I talked to Tuan yesterday from Lemongrass, when they open up, they want to participate, so they'll find a way to all work together.
If you can find a way to just have valet service for the whole Jefferson Street park right there. I would love that. I hate parking, even if I have to go inside to go to the city page or to El Jalapeno. If I can just go right to the front there, right by the mall, and just drop off my car, and then I'd be so happy. So if you can get something for like everything on the 300 block there, I would love that. Thanks.
So, any further, so what about the other merchants? I have questions about this, as you may tell. What about the other merchants down the River District? Blake,
Most
you
of the
know?
retailers are closed at the time that we're talking.
Well,
Toledo's is still open and Sweet Gola's is, yep.
4 o'clock, I mean,
5 o'clock they start. That's what time the
Well,
valet's
yeah,
starting
they
now.
start looking for spots at around 4 o'clock.
Yeah, to save the
Yeah,
two spots.
correct.
because I came in a little bit before 5 and the spots were already,
He's
you
trying
know,
to save two spots next to each other. That's
Yeah.
correct.
right, well, I mean, they were already claimed already at a little bit before 5 today, so most likely that time is 4 o'clock. So there's a lot of other merchants downtown where you're taking two, you know, and we've gone through
Prime
this big
spots, yep.
prime spots.
Yep.
The rest of the time down Third Street, you know, there's other entertainment venues pretty much all the way down Third Street, you know, so are we, question about, and, you know, you're familiar with parking downtown.
Yep.
Are we thus opening ourselves to claiming those spots as we go forward for the other entertainment venues on Third Street?
One thought was also, we talked about 15-minute parking. There's 2 stalls in the 300 block. Those could be designated stalls. The problem is they're not next to each other. But this committee can change that and make 2 15-minute stalls at mid-block that help serve Politos as they go in and grab pizza and go, or a cupcake or whatever. So there's ways we can navigate this. It's just we're looking for some temporary approval to get the pilot program up and running and see how well it works.
Lisa, yes.
Thank you. I think if we do the temporary, that will help us see what we need to address when we go to give it some permanence. I agree that if we give it some permanence, that we'll need to sign it like we signed the taxi stand, that after a certain time of day, that these spots are reserved for valet parking. And so, of course, now they're out there trying to claim spots at 4 o'clock. If the spaces are designated, they wouldn't need to fight for them. So then if they wanted to start that effort at 5 o'clock when most of the businesses have closed, there wouldn't be that friction with the other merchants down there. The other thing is if it takes off and more of the River District wants to participate, we may see this in other areas or on other blocks. So, you know, say other restaurants down there wanted to do it. You could also use a spot or two along Jefferson Street across from the 400 block stage. Or you could use a spot on McClellan, maybe, depending on where they're trying to go. You know, it could move around the corner to the side street too if it had to, you know, as it gets a little bit bigger. So I think we can accommodate that, but if we don't try it, we won't know what the pinch points are. So I think if we go with it the way they have it, and we can kind of make some notes as far as what we've observed, everyone involved, then when we go to make it permanent, we can get it done right the first time.
And maybe we should come back in May, update the committee.
That would be a great idea.
And then we talk about it in June and finalize what we want to do, and then we go to a final in July, if that works.
Because we spent a lot of money, you know, with regard, and the whole rollout of our new parking, and now we're throwing another,
But we didn't impact Third Street itself with the new parking ordinance. We actually just, people can park.
well, they still,
I
we
realize
did,
there's-
we
I
did,
believe it, I
reparking
get
and
it.
all,
I
so,
get
you know,
it.
there's issues with regard
This will
to,
help with that. This will help give them a service that they just is hassle-free.
Gary,
Yes,
look
ma'am.
at it this way. We at least use the parking ramps. You know, they won't go empty.
I mean, that's a good point, and it also, in a way, takes the pressure off a little bit in the evening, because people aren't looking for a parking space. They're parking in the pennies ramp. You know, it just takes a little bit to get there, and Adam's money. I mean,
Well, and one other thing you see down there, at least if you're down there enough, is you see a lot of cars circling the block like sharks, waiting for someone to back out. And they'll do that 2 or 3 times, and if somebody doesn't back out, they're gone. The downtown has lost that business. You know, I mean, if people are wanting to pick up pizza and they can't get in there in 15 minutes, they're just going somewhere else. So I think that's going to help everyone.
And that being said, that was the original idea, and to me, before I moved down there, that was deep on my heart and on my thoughts regarding well, it's a great spot. I'd love to be there, but are people going to go somewhere else if they can't park within 40 feet of the place?
It was one of your main topics in the first meeting I met you at.
Well, and I think you're right, and with an older clientele, that's probably a given. You know, a lot of patrons are probably willing to walk a few blocks, you know, but there's a lot that aren't, and so I think this may help. It's worth giving it a shot.
Thank you for.
Okay, sure. Anything further on this question? Any other public comment with regard to this issue? Hearing none, all in favor of said motion, say aye.
Aye.
I oppose, I will vote no on that, Lori. So we have four favor and one no. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Moving then on to a public hearing discussion, possible action, coming back up to the next item on the agenda, which is the public hearing discussion, possible action on vacating and discontinuing right-of-way at the intersection of West Thomas Street and South 15th Avenue. Is there anyone here for the public hearing with regard to this issue? If you wish to come forward, please, we need your name and address. Thank you.
Nicole Young and Will Schultz, 1406 West Thomas Street.
Go ahead.
We were hoping that, because it actually said in our lease, or in our closing documents when we bought the house on the corner there, that we were supposed to maintain that lot. And now for the last 6 months, it's been used as the construction area for the 2 apartments across the street. But I was hoping that if this does end the right-of-way area there, that that would be available for us to either purchase or get from the city in some way.
Okay, thank you very much. Anything further, any further public comment with regard to this issue? Anything further public comment? Hearing none, we'll close the public hearing, open up the staff. Alan?
Well, I could just say that there, with the, if this was proposed to be vacated or approved for vacation, it would not be out for purchase. It would just go to the adjoining landowners, which is typical for any right-of-way vacation. We do have sewer and water that extends through this easement area, so the city would keep the easement rights for the sewer and water, but the property would go to the adjoining landowners.
A question?
Yes,
So
Lisa.
then, the way that's drawn, a little tiny piece for 1033 South 15th and the rest for 1406? Is that, this isn't one where they each get half on each side of the street because it's not a road, right? So,
No, I believe the county does determine who gets the right-of-way, but it's my understanding, talking to the city surveyor, that the majority, you're right, a portion would go to 1033, a portion would go to 1406, but there would be a small remnant that would go to the other side of the road because that's where it originally came from, to the parcels on the other side of the road. Now, they would have to work out, we're hoping they can work out some kind of a deal with the people across the road to purchase that, because I wouldn't imagine they'd want to maintain that on the opposite side of the road.
that was my question, because those are, those 2 facilities are rented. And so with that, would it make sense on the front end to approach the owner of those duplexes and ask them if they would be willing to waive off their portion immediately so that the adjacent property owner on the opposite side could have the whole thing? Because we were planning to do that when we were looking at vacation of right-of-way near the Labor Temple, there, for that Sherrill project, there was talk at one point that one side of the street was to waive off its right to its half so that the development could have the whole piece. And so I know that we have the ability to do that, and I think it would be silly to offer them a little piece across the street that they have to mow a strip of when these folks want it, and they've been keeping it up. So if we could talk with that other property owner on the front end and see if they'd waive that off once it happens, and finish it all at once, and then if they want it, it's theirs.
I guess we could work that out, or try and work that out before it went to council.
Let's.
I don't know the details behind that. I'd have to talk with Ann
Okay.
on that too, but I think, based on this, I think we could approve it here, and then we could hold it before it went to council.
Right, but I would approve it with the directive that that be worked out.
So that, I trust that as a motion?
Sure.
Is there a second? There is a second. So the motion to...
Can I clarify for a minute? So if that
Yes.
does not work out, then does that mean you don't approve the vacation?
I think we have to vacate it either way.
Right, we're still
So,
vacating.
but our recommendation is that this arrangement between parties be worked out in parallel with it at the same time.
We're still, the motion is still to vacate.
Yes.
Right.
And if we can't take care of it on the front end, then the property owners will have to do it amongst themselves.
That's,
But we'll try.
that's correct. Okay, a motion is before you. Any further comments or questions from staff or committee? Hearing none, the motion to vacate and discontinue right-of-way at the intersection of West Thomas Street and South 15th Avenue. All in favor of said motion, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion is agreed to, and thus vacation will proceed to the city council. Thank you very much for coming. Moving then on to discussion, possible action on a petition for street lighting at South 54th Avenue and Beckman Drive and South 52nd Avenue at Beckman Drive.
I can.
You wanna
I can
take that, Eric?
introduce this. Sure. So there were a request for 2 streetlights, and typically we will go to WPS and have them put those up. So Rick handles that, and once we get the request, then how we handle it is we send out notices to the neighboring properties to see if there's any objections to those lights going up. One of the property owners for one of the locations did have an objection. There should be an email in your packet. And so if we don't have objections, typically if the costs are reasonable, the city, as staff, will just go ahead and put the lights up because it's a consensus. But in this case, there was an objection, so we're bringing it forward to CISM for discussion and action. Rick, do you have anything to add on that at all?
Do you want to come forward to the mic, please?
Yeah, I received 2 calls, one from the lady that sent the email. She was unable to make it tonight, and then there was some from another couple. I'm not sure if they're here tonight, but they were against it also.
On both of?
They were
both
mostly
streets?
54th and Beckman. They did not want that light. The light on 52nd and Beckman went unopposed.
Okay. Okay, thank you. Anyone here to speak to this? Is there anyone in the audience that would be, yes, come forward, please. Your name and address, please?
My last name is Tesh, and so is my wife. My first name is Tyler, and my wife's name is Tiffany. Our address is 5318 Beckman. We're the ones that actually did the petition. Just a little bit about myself so you know my background and why we did the petition. We recently moved to Wausau from an adjoining community back last summer. I've been a police officer for 15 years. I'm also a teacher with the Wisconsin Technical College System, and I'm a private contractor where I teach law enforcement throughout the state. So public safety is intimately known to me. Since we moved to Wausau, we've had reason to call Wausau Police Department on 4 occasions, given the hours that I work. I'm up at odd hours. Our street is unlit, so we have a lot of vehicles that come and park on our street. And actually, one time before I had left for work, I went to check on what this vehicle was doing outside of my house, and the person had sped off. I got a plate number like I would normally do. Wausau Police Department later ended up making contact and arresting the person. I don't know what they were doing, but immediately my thought goes to they're looking to commit burglaries, they're looking to break in vehicles, or they're doing some other kind of nefarious act in my neighborhood. When you're a police officer, you can't turn that off. That's not necessarily a job as much as it's a calling. The concern that I have is there's a walking trail right next to our residence, which goes to Teen Elementary. That's an unlit area, and there's a lot of people that use that trail all hours of the day. So my concern is not only for my property, but for also the people that use that trail, so that if they're walking on the trail, they feel safe. I know from what I do that the presence of light is a huge deterrent for crime, and that's why my wife and I felt it was necessary to bring a petition forward to our neighbors and look to get a streetlight installed at that location.
Great.
You're welcome. Oh, and actually what really spurned this, what caused us to do the petition is we had an incident in October where a lot of law enforcement converged on Stettin Elementary, and I had gone out and talked with them, and what I was told is that the reason why they were actually there is that there was an incident that was reported at the school where someone was confronted by a strange male who they believed had either a firearm or a knife. And that was the reason why, we discussed this, my wife and I, before, but that was kind of the incident, the catalyst that made us go, this needs to come forward. We need to try to get streetlights here because I think that would help deter people from doing bad things in our neighborhood.
Okay. Thank you very
welcome.
much. Is there anyone else who wishes to speak? We'll come to the committee, of course. Alisa?
Thank you. I'm glad that turn myself off here. Anyway, I'm glad that Tyler and Tiffany came to address us. I think we've talked before in neighborhoods. He's 100% right about light creating the perception of safety, and it also deters crime. We found that out here in the city's core. Every time we relight a street, the perception of safety goes up and the shenanigans go down. So it's just what it is. So, you know, the one, you have, on the petition, we have 15 people that are for it, and we have, 1 or 2 that are opposed. There's always 1 or 2 that are opposed. They don't want light near them, they don't want the pole put up, they don't want to mow around it. In this case, the one who wrote us an email was afraid that since you light the area up, new traffic would come snooping around and make the street busy. Well, that's not a reason to not make an area safe. And so, given the fact that the area qualifies, I'll move that we approve the lights.
There is a motion to approve the lighting. Is there a second? There's a second from Mary. Any further comments or questions?
I
Yes,
just
Mary.
have a question.
Sure.
Are these the same kind of WPS lights that we were going to put on Prospect, like maybe like 2 years ago, or like 18 months ago? Is it the same? Because we were going to put like 6 lights on Prospect like 18
I
months
think they
ago.
put them on power poles, adjacent power poles.
Yeah, it's pretty much what they
Similar?
would put on a wood power pole. That's what they're, it's just a standard wood pole. Because they have no overhead electricity in that area, they will do it underground to a pole, run the wires up the pole to the light.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Any comments or questions from committee or staff? Hearing none, all in favor of said motion, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion is agreed to, and thus we will approve the lighting at South 54th Avenue and Beckman Drive and South 52nd Avenue and Beckman Drive. Moving then on to the next item in the discussion, which is the discussion and possible action on the installation of a rectangular rapid flashing beacon at River Edge Trail on Washington Street. Yes, TJ.
So this item was brought to us by, or suggested that we look at this item by the Bike and Ped Committee. So we looked into the requirements from WISDOT, or the recommendations, and also did some pedestrian counts at this intersection. And, given the WISDOT guidance, it met all of the main criteria. And given that, we recommend that we put the RFBs in this location, given the amount of traffic and the development that's going around in the area.
You see the issue before us. Is there a motion to approve? There's Linda. Linda has a motion. Is there a second? Yes, Becky has a question.
I'm just looking at this map. Is this behind the library?
Yes.
Yeah, okay, yeah. I will tell you that I have had years of complaints from walkers that please do something because they saw bikers, like kids, in the summer trying to cross that, and it was dangerous. So I'm definitely going to be for this.
Okay. Yes, Mary?
Can you remind me, the RFB lights, do they change, or do they just like blink when there's like, if I press a button, right, and then it blinks to let people know that, hey, I'm going to walk across?
It's the similar lights on Fifth by the courthouse.
Yeah.
So it's with a push button, and then it's real rapid flashing on either side of the road.
Okay, so rapid flashing.
Yes.
Doesn't
Okay.
Grand Ave have them also in front of 500 Grand?
No.
Is that the same type?
No,
Oh,
there's
okay.
only two of these.
These are similar ones by East Bay on
Oh,
First
yeah.
Avenue.
Okay, yep, got it.
Oh, okay, okay. Now, right in front of East Bay, right there, right? Okay, all right, thank you.
Do I hear public comment?
Yes, Pat Peckham, 1618 Emerson Street, and I am involved with the Bike Ped Committee, and I would just like to thank staff for looking into that and finding the criteria and that they are met, because it's something that has been kind of on our radar for a couple of years now, especially during kayak events and stuff like that. And so I think this is great.
So we'll continue to move this forward. Funding isn't necessarily, well, we'll try to find the money or something, or how do you want to say it, TJ?
If we can find the money this year, great. If not, we'll have to budget for it in '21.
Okay. There was a motion in front of you. If there are no further comments or questions, all in favor of said motion, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion is agreed to, and thus the installation of a rectangular rapid flashing beacon at River Edge Trail on Washington Street. Moving then on to the next item on the agenda, which is discussion possible action on amending section 10.20.080A, designating no parking on the west side of Pied Piper Lane between Lakeview Drive and Woods Place. There is a motion to approve. Is there a second? There is a second. Any further comments or,
I have one.
there are comments. Go ahead,
There is,
Lisa.
there is. We're not that quick. I think the reason Linda's motion came so quickly is because she and I actually saw this in advance at the airport committee. And so this started there, and what's happened is with the new Alexander Airport Park, it has become wildly popular in the neighborhood. And so often, and the discussion we had at airport is that that street is parked full on both sides. And so that impedes traffic flow in between. And so what the airport has asked for is that we restrict parking on the west side of that street, and that traffic then will, or those parkers will, they're in parallel with the signage that goes up for no parking. The airport is planning to erect signage to indicate that park user parking is acceptable in the airport lot. So the people would just move a little bit to the south, they can park in the airport lot, no problem. I think today a lot of people don't realize that the airport lot is available for their use also, even though they're not using the airport. And so that'll solve some of the congestion on Pied Piper. The park users aren't, displaced too far, and it gives them a safe spot.
Okay, any further, yes, sir.
If I may, Pat Peckham again. Yeah, this had kind of an interesting trajectory. I'm an unofficial member of the Old Farts Club at the airport, and we were meeting, and one of the old farts said that he was bothered by the narrow passage in the summer months when people are using the park. And I kind of chalked it up to fussy old fart. And then John's wife said that when she comes to the airport, her normal path would be right down Pied Piper, but she skirts that and comes in another street because she's concerned about the safety there. And I thought, well, she's not an old fart. And then John, ratified what she said. And so I'm starting to think, well, maybe these people have a point here, and maybe we should do something about it. And I had already had an initial discussion, and Truth and Packaging, Mr. Buckner was consulted, and he said there hasn't been a history of accidents there that would justify it. But the anecdotal stuff was starting to pile up, and then what really got me was I was sitting there, the topic at the table at the Old Farts Club was not parking. Mailman comes in, and he comes over and he said, "Aren't you on city council?" He said, "You got to do something about that parking over there," and I knew what he meant. And so he was noticing it too. So I think it's a real concern. I think we can deal with, we kind of, as they pull in there, they'll see the sign that, they're not to park there, and they'll see that they are welcome in the airport lot, and I think it'll work out, so. I don't know if John has anything to back that up, it'd be great.
Special guest, John?
I'm just going to make sure to tell my wife that Pat didn't consider her part of the Old Farts Club.
I can't wait to read the minutes from this.
But no further comments, John?
I reiterate everything that was said. The other thing to remember is that the width of the normal city street is wider than what that entryway to the airport parking lot is. And so that exacerbates the problem and makes it a really single lane when cars are parked on both sides. Remember that we have an air ambulance operation that operates out of the airport, so there could be safety issues associated with that as well.
So the signage will not only say no parking on this side of the street, but will guide people into the parking lot off of Woods Place, I would trust then, right?
Yeah, we want to just, I haven't figured out the wording yet, but basically it's going to direct people to the airport parking lot. We'll have the no parking sign, and then below it, we'll have a sign mounted that says, park in the airport parking lot.
Okay. Because I think parking on Lakeview Drive would be, an issue that, well, we really don't want to go there either. So
I
I think
agree
if
with
we
that.
if we get them into the parking lot, I think that would be a much better place and under the guidance of parents.
I agree with that.
I think that'll work well, and one of our top-notch sign guys is behind John there, so we can work that out.
Okay, thank you, John.
Yep.
One other thing was brought up at a meeting of the neighborhood association, and everybody seemed to be in favor of it. Once it was kind of talked through, it's one of those things that first you don't, well, really, you need that? But once we talked it through, everybody was supportive of it, so I think we should give it a go.
Okay, thank you. I think that a motion would, I don't think there's a motion, the motion has been made. Sorry about that. So any comments or questions with regard to the motion, with regard to designated no parking on the west side of Pied Piper Lane between Lakeview Drive and Woods Place? All in favor of said motion, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion is agreed to, and thus we will move forward with that. The next item on the agenda with regard to a discussion possible action on developers agreement for T-Bird Enterprises and Back 40 properties on Merrill Avenue.
So there's a map included here, which the parcels that are included in this development agreement. This was in front of CISM committee to approve the amount of payment of $16,594. But at that time, we really didn't have a developer's agreement on how we were going to collect that money. So what this does is it's an agreement between the developer and the city as to when that payment will be made. There's a 5-year period in there, as if it's sold before that, it'll be paid. If it's not sold within 5 years, it'll be paid then. So I would recommend approval. It just opens up the opportunity for development up there, and it just firms up the agreement between the landowner and the city as to who's going to maintain the pond and where the stormwater will go in the future development.
Okay, a motion to approve the developers agreement for T-Bird Enterprises and Back 40 properties, Merrill Avenue, would be in order. There is a motion by Lisa. Is there a second? Becky, second. Any further comments or questions with regard to the motion? Hearing none, all in favor of said motion, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion is agreed to, and thus we move the developers agreement on. Moving then on to the next item on the agenda, which is the discussion possible action regarding aligning posted parking restrictions at the following locations: 300 block of Jefferson, 300 block of Sherman Street, 500 to 2100 blocks of North 5th Street. Court, I think this is pretty much just sort of lining up the ordinance with regard to what's on the street. Is that right?
That's correct. Just basically housekeeping, as those areas are posted, but it's not listed in ordinance, so.
Move to approve by Linda. Is there a second? There is a second by Mary. Any further comments or questions with regard to the motion? Hearing none, all in favor of said motion, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The motion is agreed to, and thus we're aligning the posted parking restrictions with regard to the ordinance. Moving then on to this, the next item on the agenda is the discussion action on no parking on either side of West Thomas Street from 17th Avenue to Cleveland Avenue.
So this is just some housekeeping also. I mean, when Thomas Street was reconstructed over the last two phases, there is no parking on Thomas Street, and it's marked that way, bike lane, no parking. However, there was never an ordinance created, so 9 and 10, basically, because it splits East Thomas and West Thomas, so I had to put it in two resolutions, I felt. So this basically will put into code what is marked on the street for Thomas Street, all the way from 17th to, in this instance, Cleveland, and the next one to Grand Avenue.
Move to approve.
There's a motion to approve. Is there a second? There's a second by Becky. All in favor? Question? Yes, yes.
Sorry. I just want to share that for 9, 10, 11, and 12 as agenda items, I'm just going to stay consistent with how I've been voting on the Thomas Street efforts, so I will be voting no. Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
So then the motion in front of you, all in favor of said motion, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? There is one no. Moving then on to the next item on the agenda, discussion possible action on no parking on either side of East Thomas Street from Cleveland Avenue to Grand Avenue. A motion would be in order for this? There's a motion by Linda. Is there a second?
I'll second.
There is a second. Any comments or questions? Alan pretty much explained it prior. All in favor of said motion, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? There is one no. Then moving on to the next item of discussion about possible action on no parking on east side of South First Avenue from West Thomas Street to Stewart Avenue. Motion, go ahead, Alan.
I can explain this one quickly. Again, when we reconstructed First Avenue, South First Avenue from West Thomas to Stewart, the cross-section came to this committee and it was approved to put a bike lane on the east side all the way from Thomas to Stewart, but that was never put into the code. So this just, it's marked a bike lane, no parking. This just needs to go into the code to make it able the police to enforce a ticket.
Move to approve.
Motion to approve, is there a second? There's a second by Becky. Any further comments or questions? Hearing none, all in favor of said motion, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? There is a one no. So then moving on, discussion possible action on no parking on the west side of South First Avenue from a point 210 feet north of the curb line on West Thomas Street.
So right now, this isn't marked. This is just a recommendation of staff to not allow parking on the west side of First Avenue, north of Thomas Street. Pretty much where I took this picture, you can see the picture, I'm standing at the spot where the sign would be put up there, so there'd be no parking from this point back to Thomas Street. And why that's being recommended is the semi-traffic and the turning vehicles coming off of Thomas, and with the bike lane on the other side, it gets pretty tight. The main entrance now that we took it, the main truck entrance into 3M will now be off of First Avenue. They used to come in off of Thomas, and so those trucks are going to be turning that corner every day. This will just keep that traffic away. There's also two driveways right there that make it, if a person was parked in between those driveways, it's going to make it tight. So my recommendation would be to move it that 210 feet would put it north of the driveway that you look at there.
So 210 feet from the corner of Thomas, right?
Correct.
Where's the terminus of this, where you were standing? And then south
Yes.
to Thomas? Okay.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, move to approve.
There's a motion to approve. Is there a second? There's a second by Becky. Any further comments or questions with regard to the motion? Hearing none, all in favor of said motion, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? No, there is one no. Motion is approved thus. Then moving on to number 13, discuss 17th Avenue, Stewart Avenue area walk audit. Brad, I believe, has this issue.
So included in the packet were two walk audits. The summarized by the HEAL Coalition. We've brought a few of these forward to this committee before, and these were the most recent walk audits that were done. So I included the reports and the minutes from the Bicycle Pedestrian Advisory Committee where they were first presented in the packet. I'll just quickly summarize some of the big highlights, I guess, from each one. The first one on the agenda was the 17th Avenue and Stewart Avenue area. I think one of the big takeaways there was that the intersections were really difficult to get across, pretty much all of the intersections, both the signalized and the unsignalized. The 17th Avenue, I guess I should maybe mention what the route is first for that area. So the walkout, it started south of Stewart Avenue, coming out of the gates of Marathon Park on 17th, and then kind of near Garfield, I think Garfield Avenue, went north through the intersection of Stewart and 17th, up to either Elm Street or 18th Avenue, and then down kind of by Panera Bread and through that area and back to the start. So each intersection was difficult to navigate, especially for someone who has mobility challenges or is, slower to walk. The signals didn't give people enough time to get through each phase, and because of the multiple phases on Stewart Avenue and 17th Avenue, it took about 5 to 6 minutes to get through that intersection just to continue going north on 17th. The sidewalks along 18th Avenue and 17th Avenue and Stewart Avenue were all inconsistent. They were on one side for large sections of it, so it required people to cross the street to get to different destinations or to just continue going in the same direction. And then I think I mentioned the signal timing already. Most of the bus stops along 17th Avenue were inaccessible. They were mostly grassy areas, so if somebody's in a wheelchair or something, it might be difficult to get there, and then, of course, it makes it harder to clear in the winter as well. I think those were some of the big ones for that one. Some of the highlights of the recommendations were just to complete the sidewalk network, complete the sidewalks along 18th Avenue and 17th Avenue, improve the bus stops, and then lengthen the signal timing for pedestrians to make it easier for people to get through the intersection. So,
Any questions, Brad? Yes?
I have a question, and I haven't lived here in Wausau long enough, even though I've been here for like 9 years. It just seems like I'm still, new to town here. But on 17th Ave, because that's one of my running routes when I run outdoor, why does the sidewalk stop on 17th right in front of the Marathon Park gate? I get it, you're probably trying to force people to go in the park, right, as another form of a route, but why couldn't we just have a sidewalk that goes all the way through?
and that was one of the issues identified too, because in order to, if you're coming from Marathon Park and going north, you have to cross 17th Avenue, which is difficult to cross. And then you have to cross 17th Avenue again once you get up to Stewart Avenue, which again is difficult to cross. So if you have to follow a sidewalk, or if you want to follow a sidewalk, it requires you to go through intersections multiple times that are hard to get through. That, that intersection added 6 minutes to the crossing time, so.
Right, because, and I shouldn't be doing this, but when I'm running, I actually just cross by the train tracks right there.
Yeah.
And I know I'm not supposed to do that, but, and then just some feedback from my kids who walk home from John Muir. I always tell them I don't want them to walk through the park, right? Because there's some dark spots in there, and, we know that we've had some concerns about, people who frequent the park. And so my kids have a hard time trying to figure out how they get across from the track and field right there across, because there's no sidewalk right there once they cross. So it's like they have to go across to Starbucks and then over to Walgreens for a sidewalk. So I hope that we can do something, with that area, because we have a lot of people who are, walking, pedestrians and, students and children and elderly that probably use that area.
And so I should note too that these items tonight aren't for action, but this is, something to keep in mind going forward, and some of the bigger items can be looked to budget for in future years to make improvements. And then just, we've talked after the Bike Ped Committee about, finding maybe some of the small ones that could be worked into maintenance plans or work plans as well, so.
Wait, I didn't get my answer about the sidewalk that doesn't go all the way through. Eric, do you know?
I don't, I can answer that a little bit, I guess. Just a couple, not, more than a couple of years ago, but we put sidewalk on the west side of 17th. That was never there. So at one point, there wasn't sidewalks on either side, so we did put them on one side, and the thought was that people could go through Marathon Park on the other side. And I guess it was a budget issue that we weren't gonna put it on both sides, but, so I can tell you that's where it goes. And also the Marathon County Park right-of-way, both on the west side of the park along 17th and the north side of the park along Stewart's very tight. So if we are gonna put that sidewalk, it's gonna be on parkland, and then you run in, when we redid Stewart Avenue, we looked at putting sidewalk through there, and it ran into parkland dedication issues and right-of-way. So we didn't put it on there as part of then because we couldn't do it because of the way the parkland was dedicated. But, so there's a lot of issues and why, but I know we did add it on the west side several years ago. We budgeted it and we added it. I don't, it's at one time it was made a decision to not put it on either side of 17th. I don't know how many years ago that was, but we have added it to the west side.
Yes, Lisa?
Thank you. In this area, I've asked myself the same questions that Mary's asked. It makes no sense, and I think a lot of that area was designed and then redesigned, partially, I think, with some input from DOT as well, because that whole thing was a connecting highway. Back when bike and ped was, I guess, considered less and not prioritized. And so when my kid went to John Muir, there was the same exact problem. And the crossing guards at 12th Avenue, there's nobody to help kids get across at 17th, and there's a whole bunch of them doing it in both directions. Worse is that that area, from a walkability standpoint, is so unsafe that if John Muir and their student council has an event at Days Bolidome, they pay for a school bus to take those kids to Days. That is so unsafe, they cannot get them across en masse easy enough that they're paying for a school bus to take them a quarter of a mile. So someday, if there's a way for us to fix that, I would love for us to fix that. Even if it doesn't mean, sidewalk is public right-of-way, and so I can see where that's a problem with parkland dedication. We had a similar issue with the sidewalks around the 400 block and the terrace. But parkland can be modified by park owners. So if that's a county park, and at some point through a partnership with us, if they install it as a walking trail or whatever, maybe it doesn't have to be a sidewalk, but there needs to be some way for people, even people walking to get to the fair. It's bad. And so I think these recommendations are well taken. I don't think any of the solutions are easy or cheap, but I think we need to look for some.
I just want to add the funny thing, Lisa, is that people start making their own trail on that east side of, even, it's.
You can see where
you
they've
can
been.
see, you can see the track marks.
100%.
So I think there's a need to have that partnership and that discussion in the near future.
Anything further for Brad on this issue? Did you want to speak a little bit next to the Bridge Street and Second Street area?
Yeah, so this one's a little simpler to describe route. We started at Second and Bridge, went north on Second to East Wausau Avenue, and then over to Sixth Street on East Wausau, and then back, so it's a kind of rectangle. I think the biggest issues here were mostly along Bridge Street and East Wausau Avenue. Bridge Street in particular, the sidewalk's so close to the street that it felt uncomfortable to walk there. Crossing, again, was difficult. Drivers kind of cut in front of the pedestrians when pedestrians were walking with the walk signal at a couple of the intersections, I think. And then, let's see, curb ramps in a lot of cases were diagonal, which can, if somebody's visually impaired and using a cane to walk, to guide themselves, the curb ramps, they kind of take the direction of where they're going to direct themselves out in the intersection, so it can direct people out into the middle of the intersection if they're kind of pointing that direction. Let's see, I think the bus stops, again, were identified as either inaccessible or kind of no place to sit. They're right on the curb, and people were sitting on the curb waiting for the bus to get there. And one of the walkout, and I think on Second Street, the main issues identified were just that there's no sidewalk on the west side. So the Boys and Girls Club and the Bridge Community Clinic there kind of created issues getting access to those, for children that are using it and stuff, because you're having to either, if you're getting dropped off in the street, you have no, down the road, you have no sidewalk on that side to get to either of those locations. East Wausau Avenue had, most of the issues there were poor condition sidewalks. They were broken or heaved. I think a big one is the riverfront access from East Wausau Avenue and Second Avenue is very uninviting. Doesn't make it look like a place that you want to go to, which, of course, as the North Riverfront develops, that's something that can be improved. But and then the intersection, I think the two of the intersections that were noteworthy too is the intersection of 6th Street and East Wausau Avenue was very difficult to cross. Yeah. The site distances, if you're coming south from East Wausau and crossing there, like the road width is so wide, and there's a free flow right turn there for people coming north on 6th onto East Wausau. By the time you could start crossing when it was clear and you couldn't see any cars coming, and by the time you were at the end of the intersection, and this is for people that are walking at a relatively quick pace, you'd have a car, almost turning into you. So that was a big one that I think was identified as needing improvement. And then the intersection of 6th Street and Bridge Street as well, there's no pedestrian signal on the north side. And with the turn lane, the left turn lanes there, it's kind of hard to predict what the signals are if you're crossing there. So it either forces people to cross again, if you're going on the north side of Bridge Street, to make like a 3-way cross, or to just kind of hope that you're guessing what the signal is right and crossing at the location that you're at. So, yeah.
Any comments or questions with regard to that? Yes,
I just have a
6th Street,
question.
Becky?
Yeah, 6th Street and East Wausau Avenue. I mean, that's just crap. I mean, is there any plans on doing anything? There's near misses. People don't understand how, I mean, can we even put up with the people that are going north on 6th and want to take a left on East Wausau Avenue, they have that. Could they have a yield sign when the light is green or something? There's so many near misses. There's so many, I mean, it's, what happens is you have a green light and you're turning right, and these people just come here, and they all want to get into this lane for some god. And everybody here wants to get in this lane, and it always ends up like this.
Everybody wants to get into that left lane going west on Wausau
Right.
Avenue.
And the other ones want to go
So then you have both of them into that.
And nobody's understanding that intersection. We've talked about this before. That is, and turning the other way is going south on 6th to turn, east on East Wausau Avenue. That's, you have to sit through 3 or 4 lights sometimes because of all the traffic going north.
Coming north.
Yeah, and that's, people try to, they'll wait till it's, they're sick of waiting, and then they go through a red. I don't know I don't think there's any easy, but if we ever can, that is one whole intersection that has a lot of traffic and is messy.
Please not in my neighborhood. Well, that's right. Don't let that go any further. We don't want to let that to go any further.
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, the engineering staff can look at some of the concerns on that intersection and see if there's some modifications that could be made. It is State Highway 52 through the city, so DOT does have to be taken into account. They would be responsible for reconstruction, but, minor alterations we can do, so something we can put on our radar to see if we can make some modifications to improve the flow or the safety.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Brad. Any further comments or questions with regard to the walk audits? Hearing none, then moving on to the update on winter maintenance operations. Who wants to, Eric's going to, I guess, lead this one.
I can open it up, yeah. So, obviously, this winter, we moved into the winter season, had some early snows, ice, slush, kind of had the gamut. Moving forward, we had a lot of calls, a lot of concerns. So I wrote up a little bit of a lengthy staff report. I'm not going to, read it, because I'm pretty sure everybody can do that on their own. But, I guess we go through, staffing, made some highlights on the staffing, made some highlights on, pretty much on how we approach a storm. Hasn't changed. There's been some minor items and things like that, but really, we brought this forward to CISM to provide some information at this point. If there's anything specific that any members would like us to take a look at, we'd be happy to do that. We can answer any questions. We have Rick and Chad and Chris here that can answer any specific questions on that. Rick and I are preparing a presentation for City Council on Tuesday with regards to our winter maintenance operations. We'll have a narrative with that. We'll have some short videos with that as well, showing some of the items that we do, during a storm, after a storm, and just ongoing maintenance through the winter. So, but if there's anything specific that you have.
So the latest, because of the controversy with regard to emergency, snow emergencies and all,
Yeah.
we just had the one couple weeks ago, maybe. How did that go? Did that?
This was the first year, so we anticipated having the snow emergency coming up and how we were going to address the parking issues, so not having overnight parking during the snow emergency. So we worked with the police department. They put on their parking patrol for the night. They also had the officers, and they put the drivers in direct contact with the officers, and it worked really well on our side. So that was one very positive thing, I think, that came out of this. I mean, we're kind of moving forward with that. And, the next snow emergency, so we're tracking how many tickets we're writing. We're tracking different items on, what went well, what did not go well. We plan on bringing something back to CISM related to the overnight parking, whether that's going to be a ban, what other solutions that will be potential for a decision. And
How many tickets did we write for the snow emergency that you declared?
98.
Oh, that's not
Police
bad.
Department wrote 98.
That's not bad.
Right. For the first one. Right. And we did try to do a lot more public outreach. So we contacted the media, the police department contacted the media. And so that's something else too that we're working on, is trying to get out more information. We had the trash can incident where trash cans were knocked over. But you have to understand, people have to have their trash cans on the backside of the curb. And if they are in the street, our drivers aren't trying to hit them, but there is a potential that they will get knocked over. And that will continue. So part of it is education and outreach to the
I've
residents.
noticed, I just emailed Kathy Chriselle today and said, would you please put it in the newsletter? Because,
great.
and put a picture in there, and that comes out yet the end of January, which is good yet, because I told her, as I drive through my neighborhood, I see it getting worse than better of people putting it into the right of way on the streets.
Right.
And I have, I posted it on Nextdoor, I talk about it in my neighborhood meetings, but I don't know why it's not happening. I'm sure that the driveways are becoming narrower as, as the snow piles
Yep.
up, and then people, but I really try, and we still need to do a lot of education on that, because people really, are just putting it, and I see more than it usually is. So hopefully that will be in the newsletter too, that will go to everybody, because some people don't watch,
Right.
like, local media and things.
No, I think that's a great idea. I think, to kind of put it in perspective too, the last snow event that we had, I mean, we had operators, we had lead people, supervisors that were in for over 20 hours, so they drove, they managed, they administered, that event. And then eventually they were able to get some rest, but then they came back in the next day, so we do the snow removal, we do, so it's just kind of an ongoing over the next few days with the city. So, Rick?
I just wanted to thank the police department for that event that we had. We actually had emailed them some problem areas where an apartment complex had 37 cars. They have a sign in their parking lot that if it snows more than 3 inches, they need to park on the street. Cord had them emailed, and that was not an issue. So they looked at didn't park out there on the street until after this snow emergency was over. So, and then the direct contact. The drivers made a big point of how that really helped. Within minutes sometimes, when they called in a car, there was a ticket on the car. So the CSOs and the parking utility people really helped with that event. We are a little bit short-staffed. We are starting to get back up to speed. And if you can imagine that you're a brand-new operator, and if you had 2 or 3 inches snowstorm, and you were on a sidewalk unit or even in a plow truck, how easy that would be able to find the curb and where the infrastructure was. But when we had the big incidents of the 10 and, you know, the larger snowstorms, it just exacerbates the, you know, the difficulty of that. And the skilled operators that we do have, you know, that's not a big issue. But when you're a brand new operator, I mean, it's really frustrating. You know, we were all there when we started. And every event Chris's partner, for instance, he was green the first few snowstorms, and he is really up to speed now. And Chris has mentioned that, you know, the more time in the seat, we're going to get better at this. But if you look at the dedication of our staff, I'm very proud of our staff, because these guys take ownership, and they are calling in all the time, hey, we got to do something about the visibility here, or we've got to do something with that hill. And they take this really personal, and they take pride in it. Because if they didn't, they wouldn't be working 20 out of 24 hours the day that we tabled the overnight parking. In that event that we had, we knew that that night we had an event, but it was safe to get here because those guys worked from 7 in the morning till 7 at night, and 4 hours later they were back to try to make commerce happen, and also safe for us to get to and from work. So we can be very proud of the staff that we have, and I am very proud of the staff that we have. And the cooperation with the police department has gotten so much better in the last 10 years. I think co-opting after we took over the maintenance of their vehicles, I think we're all kind of putting faces together, and I think that's part of what helped, but also the cooperation between the departments has really been really helpful for all of us in the public safety aspect.
Thank you. Yes? Becky?
I, as others, you know, had a lot of questions and concerns, and not from people that normally do. And I just want to, you know, represent my residents, is that it is very, very important for them that whatever it takes, if DPW needs more people, whatever it takes, because this is why they live in the city and pay taxes. And I agree, this is a big public health and safety issue, is to have our roads safe. And so, you know, going forward, I hope that, you know, because I've heard some, well, we need to know. And I will support you, because this is what people want, is to be, you know, to be able to get home after they work, get up, and I live in Riverview with all of our hills and water running under the ice, which I don't understand, and all of that kind of thing. And so they just, you know, so I'm happy they're coming to our neighborhood meeting, and we can discuss it, and I'm sure they'll tell you that we want to give you whatever you need to make this all work.
I appreciate that. And I want to talk about that water running under the ice. This has probably been one of the worst years that I've ever seen in my 36 years because of that rain that we had. We had over an inch of rain on top of a lot of snow. That rain got down underneath the snow. We have areas that we've never addressed before with the ice buildup and all the water running. We are working on some areas that we're going to address with some drain tile. We did some work out on Highland Drive with a contract this fall, and it's really helped. We haven't had to cut the ice. We've got a problem on East Wausau Avenue up in the 1200 block, and we're going to address that with TJ this next summer, and we've got a number of other areas. But out in Morgan Creek, for example, Connor Davis, we have the road is heaved about that far because the water is coming out of the side of that hill, doesn't have any place to go, and it's got hydraulic pressure, and it's heaved up a brand new road, or a fairly new road. So there are issues there with that. And we understand that this has been a really tough year because what happened is when we are fighting the storm during the day, it is warm enough that we can plow it off. We wait until we get a little bit of rest and we come in. A lot of times the temperature has dropped. We're worried about that today with the rain, and I understand the issues. But if we look at less maintenance. We are not doing less maintenance. As of, since Halloween, I ran the report this afternoon, we've had over 1,882 cubic yards of sand spread, and we have 1,256 ton of salt. So that's unusually a lot for this amount of time of the season. I know Bobby Splinter from the Finance Department told me last fall that don't have any more snowstorms in 2019 because you're done. Well, I'm sorry I didn't have that happen, but I don't think it was my doing. But I just wanted to address something if I could take a moment to think about, we've added so much sidewalk in the number of years that when we have expansion or reconstruction on Bridge Street, Sherman Street, Thomas Street, Campus Drive, Highway U, Westwood Drive, 28th Avenue, Highway R, 52 Parkway, 17th Avenue. Every time we do one of those projects, we add more maintenance to the sidewalk. Every time we do another subdivision. When we had staff in 1986, we had 61 employees. Today we have 41. Fully staffed, we would be at 44. And if you look at this map that I generated, that was what it looked like in the darker shaded area in 1977, and that's where we are today. And we're almost a Marathon City, and we're almost a Ringgold. And our staff has not grown. So we've talked with Lisa, we've talked with Eric. As soon as we address some other issues, we would probably go to try to increase staff or do something else to try to reduce the maintenance. Just for an example, the expansion of the hangars at the airport. We used to be able to stack the snow on both ends because the new hangars kind of impacted that. We have to push everything from like here to like 2 blocks down out into the field. So that just added more maintenance. And every time we do a new subdivision and I think it's like the park department, the same thing. We add, but we never add support staff and equipment to do that. So that's part of my my talk, but I think there was a question over
Yes,
here.
there's, Linda?
Question for Rick. I've seen a few comments on a blog for, the neighborhood blog, whatever it's called, about filling sand barrels. Is that like a normal part of maintenance in kind of a downtime when they're not plowing, that people check those levels?
It is. We try to regularly schedule that, and as of today, I can tell you that the sand barrels are full. Having said that, I know in the past few seasons, if we have snowstorms back to back to back to back, that is lower on our priority. So that's why what we've done is we've offered sand at the Department of Public Works. You can pick it up Monday through Friday, 7 to 4. There's a pile right out in front of the office. You can come and show your ID, and we have sand available all the time there. And that's how we have 90 barrels in town. One of my ideas is that maybe we shouldn't have 90, we should have 4 larger areas, maybe in like Sylvan Hills, the airport. That was my idea, just because then we'd be able to fill them up in a half a day or maybe less, and then they would be, I know it's like anything else. Once you have a barrel in your neighborhood and you know where it is and you're going to use it, it's really hard to take it away.
I just wanted to add, since Tiana Phillips is still here and had a comment, on snow issues, it's a complicated issue. People, on the one hand, are short of parking. On the other hand, we need to get streets plowed efficiently. I thought 98 citations was pretty high, but if that was low, I'm in shock. But, my son was choking one night during a blizzard and had to have an ambulance at the door where we were having Thanksgiving. So we certainly wanted the ambulance to get through, and that was one of the narrower streets up on the east side. So we did defer this so that people would have a chance to plan. And I know it's not fun walking with a bag of groceries and a 6-year-old, been there, but you need to understand that it's complicated on our part too.
Lisa, yes?
Thank you. I think that, as Rick said, I came down last week. I met with our DPW staff, with Rick and with Eric about snow removal, just because there's been a lot of complaints. There's been a lot of media coverage as far as, what's happening or not happening. And, I find it It just disappoints me when I read comments on, whether it's Nextdoor or social media or whatever, where, people are immediately on the attack and their expectations are, somewhat unrealistic, and they're posting stuff like, the city of Wausau doesn't know how to plow streets, or the city of Wausau is purposely not plowing streets. And that's just not what's happening. And so we talked about what's different. And what's different is the moisture content of some of these storms. Our airport staff trying to clean out the airport runways and stuff have experienced the exact same thing. You can put on skates and head down the runway. I mean, we're managing an inordinately large amount of water and ice that normally isn't the case. And so that said, what happens sometimes is that by the time people pick up their phone to call DPW or call their alderperson, they're already angry. And so they call and light up their alderperson, and that person turns around and lights up Rick or tries not to, but that's kind of what happens sometimes, and it travels downhill, and that's not good. And I don't want our plow crew to ever think that the city council does not support them and we're not grateful for their efforts, because we 110% are. That said, it was brought to my attention that even when they're at full staff, when the vacancies are filled, they don't have enough employees to have any backups. So if somebody gets sick, hurt, or takes vacation, there's like no one. And so I asked them, as a finance chair, I asked them to submit a staffing request. Because as Rick said, the city keeps getting bigger, the sidewalks keep getting to be more and more. I asked them to put in a staffing request for at least 2 full-time people. And I think we really need to seriously consider that in our next budget cycle. One other thing we talked about is maybe getting some pricing to see what the cost would be to outsource through a contract, through an RFP, sidewalk maintenance of city-maintained sidewalk areas. And it's not that we're doing a bad job or not getting to them fast enough, but there may be more important work for them to do. If we could outsource that sidewalk work, which is easier to train and it's done with smaller equipment, we could free up our crew members that are spending their entire days cleaning up 19 miles of sidewalk to drive a plow truck or a salt truck. And so I'd love to see some pricing on that. Sometimes that works well when we can partner with the private sector on a contract basis for the easier stuff. And, street maintenance and sidewalk maintenance is one of the most visible public services we provide. And, not everyone calls the police, not everyone calls for emergency services, not everyone has a fire. But everyone travels the streets, and when they can't, there is no end to the anxiety that people experience. And it's a public safety hazard. If emergency services can't get to you, they're no good either. At some point, the fire truck has to be able to get to the fire, and that starts with the roads. And, we have recently tried to ramp up our budget for street maintenance and seal coating and all these things, but we haven't added bodies. So that said, I'm certainly willing to consider that in finance, and I would love to see that staff request. I think we as a council are all aware of the problems. We're coming off of 2 awful winters, and we see the effects of this do more with less stuff, and we need to just think about that a little differently. The other thing I think that is probably going to take the place of a repeal of the overnight parking ordinance. The idea of repealing the overnight parking ordinance in the winter, if nothing else, called attention to the fact that we have have been having a serious failure in the enforcement of even odd parking. That's why there's a problem. It's not that people should never park on the street. If they were all on one side one night and all on the other side the next night, and people followed that rule, and were aware of that rule, we wouldn't have to repeal overnight parking, because they could do one side and then they do the other side. The streets would be in a better situation. So we've talked about ways that we can partner better to enforce the even odd parking more consistently, so people don't get a ticket one night and then come to the clerk's office to pay it and go, well, I've been parking in the same place for 5 years and no one cared, and last night I got a ticket. How do you argue with that person? And so I think as we start to take a more holistic approach to all of this, the staffing, the even odd, whatever, I think our need to repeal overnight parking will probably take care of itself and we won't have to do it. That's my hope. So all those things working together, though, I think we're on a path to a solution. And I think it's important, too, for us to manage people's expectations. People may not know that the city of Wausau has an app. We have a smartphone app. That smartphone app accepts or provides push notices. Our city Facebook page can alert people to things. Our website can post announcements. And so when people sign on to those items and when they have them, I think one thing it would be important to do is good communication. So if we know that one particular plow route is really shorthanded on a particular storm, it wouldn't hurt to put out an announcement that says, hey, southwest side, your plow crew is really short tonight. We may be getting to you late. Please be patient, so that, you don't have these 20 calls to the mayor's office complaining that they never see a plow and it's already noon. If people's expectations are managed on the front end, I think we can diffuse some of this anger that they build up by the time they call someone else. And so I think strategically, if we look at it all differently, we can have a better outcome. And I've asked Rick to come at some point also, and I think maybe Tuesday night, give a presentation at the council level, so the entire council, we all are getting the same calls and complaints from people who don't normally complain. And so I think it's important that we all understand what the priority plow routes are, what the priority salt routes are, that we see those maps, so that when people call us, we have fact-based answers to give to. And Rick has given that presentation before, but it's been about 3 years, and we have new council members since then that haven't gotten that information. So we're going to try to work on that as well, so that everybody has good information to give to the public. So that's just my 2 cents, but that's the outcome of our meeting last Friday. But I was down here for an hour longer than I planned to be, because I had great questions and they had good answers. So I think we worked through a lot of stuff on Friday.
That was a great meeting, but if I could add one thing. Recruiting is really tough. Back in 2010, we would have 250 applicants for a position in our organization. Right now, this last recruitment, we had 4. We offered to 2 individuals because 2 looked like somebody we would want to take on. We've been recruiting for Chad's position because he was internally promoted to supervisor back in July. And we just filled that 3 weeks ago. So I can ask for 2 more individuals, but if we don't look at compensation, and I know we did a wage study, but I'm sorry, the market is where we are not paying to recruit people and to, entice people to come and work for us. The benefit package has depleted since 2010. It's a known fact. It has. So our recruiting effort is really tough. And we used to get the best of the best, and now we're getting, a few applicants, and I have 3 positions open. I could only offer to 2 people that we felt comfortable with. We have to go back out and advertise again. So we have to look at the compensation package also. So we have to take care of internally people that we have, so we can offer maybe a little bit better wage, because we know people are putting on sign-on bonuses to come and work for these organizations. So we have to look at that aspect of it too, because I can ask for 2 more, but if I can't recruit them, it doesn't pay for me to ask. So I just want to make sure that everybody has that also. And I know it's budget, and I know it's money, but it's also public safety, and it's also, if we get somebody that's really skilled and really valuable to the organization, they can do the work of 3 people, of trainees that we need to train, and the institutional knowledge we need people to maintain and to recruit.
My only other comment would be that, and in response to what Rick is saying, is he's right on that, we also need to take a look at the job descriptions and the salary ranges that are associated with them, as far as how they went into the wage study versus what they got out of it. Because if we need to make some adjustments to that, that would account for some of the disparity that we see on the front end. And then we can figure out a way to also work on the compression issue that we know we have in the middle. But that said, I asked them for a staffing request for 2 people, because I know we can probably afford 2 people. In reality, they need like 8 people. And so we may see a staffing request for 2 people a couple times, because I asked Rick, do you have enough work for if we add workforce, do you have work to keep them busy all year? He said he could get 10 people and keep them busy all year. That's how behind they are. So if we can get maybe 2 next year, the following year, we may see a request for 2 more, because they're really behind the 8 ball. I mean, in the time that we've not increased the size of their workforce, we, just as an example, with the increase in the size of the city, we've added 5 police officers. So, growth happens, and we need to catch up on the DPW end too with that same thing. So.
And with all the mandates with the stormwater issue, the stormwater has really impacted us a lot. Plus, we have an infrastructure that's 100 years old. Every time we send the jetter out to clean it, a manhole or catch basins, that list we'll get 20 of them in a week that need repair. So The stormwater issues with the new detention basins and things like that are starting to rear its head for cleaning and maintaining. So a stormwater utility is something that we really should push for. And it's really taken its toll on, we could have 2 repair crews out and 1 crew just cleaning storm sewer. A lot of the flooding is, some of the issues are that we've got a lot of storm sewer that isn't clean. So if we have a 30-inch pipe and it's half full, we only have 15 inches of capacity again. So a lot of that, and I just have to let people know that this is an issue. And all of the mandates that come down with the Clean Water Act and all of the things we need to do for the environmental, for our MS4 permit with the DNR for discharge to the river with our stormwater. These are all things that we need to address and we should address really aggressively to help the department.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for having
Thank
us.
you. We have the chair of HR, so I'm sure that some of these issues may be coming to HR in the near future also. Anything further on winter maintenance? Otherwise, we'll move on to further agenda items for future meetings. Hearing none, a motion to adjourn would be in order. There is a motion. Is there a second? We stand adjourned. Thank you very much.